This coffee chat is basically about a question, and it's also going to be about some of my answers about what that question might be. But they aren't necessarily going to match your answers. My question is, what makes an heirloom gun? Now, in my group of friends, we started a tradition that we vary a little bit depending on who it is and what it is and all that. And the tradition goes like this. Most of the time when people get married, the gifts are all for the women and the guy's kind of in the way. So we men get together that are friends of him, and the best man has the responsibility of asking for donations from the other guys who are the groom's friend, and buying a gun that fits his personality and his taste, and one that he'll really enjoy for a long time. And that gun is his. It can be an heirloom gun for him, or it can be something he pawns when he needs to pay for a bill. It's his with no strings. But preferably it'd be something that would make sense as an heirloom gun. Some of the guys, it's their first gun. One of my friends who doesn't love guns, I gave an antique military sword. So the rule isn't absolute, but there's an expectation. Now, the other bit is, I know of men who, when they had a child or a grandchild, on the day the child was born, they went and got a rifle and a bottle of whiskey or something like that, so that when that child reaches majority, they can present them with something. And in some of the cases, maybe they get to enjoy that rifle with their dad or grandpa, knowing that someday it will be theirs, and then they'll have those memories attached to it all their life. Now, I mentioned in my last video that this gun right here, and apparently doing that bothers some people, it does not me. If that was going to damage this gun, it would have by now. Anyway, that's an aside. This gun is unharmed by that. This gun is an heirloom gun to me, not because of its intrinsic value, although I think it's a gun that is a good gun and will last generations. It's because of who I got it from and who it represents. This is my first pistol as a adult of pistol purchasing age, but mostly this is a gun that makes me think of Grandpa and going and shooting with him, and how my grandpa would have traded it for pennies on the dollar because he had it too long and he's a horse trader, and he would have felt sorry for somebody, and I could just see the itch forming, and I had too many good times with him to let him get taken. So I gave him more money than I probably could have bought a new one for, to be honest. And that was no big deal to me. I was working a lot of hours. I had the money. I was going to buy something anyway. And anyway, there's another gun that would be a potential candidate for me for an heirloom gun. And that would be this one, which is a Smith & Wesson 2206 TGT. I'm not going to dry fire this one because it's a 22 and you don't dry fire rimfires. This one is a weird gun. It's what Smith & Wesson made to replace their Model 41, which a lot of people think of as near perfection for a Target 22. If you read the reviews on this, you'll see all kinds of bad things, about half of which are true. The real bad thing is they gave it too much slide mass and too rough a chamber, and so it's a little bit picky about ammo. It wants the hot stuff. As long as you keep it clean and feed it hot stuff, it runs great. If you're wanting to run the super light, standard velocity, target, LA match or whatever, it's probably not going to be great. But in that, it has a lug above the barrel, barrel's down here, it's tensioned, it's not where most people are looking for it. This is a knurled bushing for adding a suppressor. They're not very expensive for this, and this is the gun to put a suppressor on if you want to suppress 22. Leave your Ruger Mark whatever at home. This is the gun you want. Trust me. No, actually, forget that. You don't want this gun, leave them all for me. Especially the little cute baby version that I don't have yet. Anyway, this gun was one I grew up with envying my friend. My friend had this pistol that he bought from a person at a gun store that had fired, I think, something like 30 rounds through it and put it in a box, and he bought it for him, or from him, with his dad overseeing the deal, and I forget exactly the particulars, but You know, it was pristine. And I'd kind of been around guns, but my dad wasn't a gun guy, and I'd been taught gun safety, and I took it seriously, but I just didn't have any opportunity. And every time I'd go out and shooting, I was just terrible. And my friends seemed to be relatively okay at it, as near as I could tell, and I was just happy to hit something sometimes. And then my friend handed me this gun, and I just started hitting. It just worked. It was easy. I'd aim at it, and it was natural to aim, and I would hit what I aimed at, and I never missed. Every can I aimed at went over when I made small targets, and for a long time this gun defined for me what a pistol ought to be. And some of those principles are the same. It has a weird steep grip angle. It's very thin. And importantly, the thin, flat planes all want to line up with your eyes, and they all naturally want to line up with this bone and this bone. And if you do the blind point test with this gun, for me, it is just dead on. Now, sometime later when I was an adult, a screw and a couple things were missing on this, and my friend had been frustrated with taking it to a gun shop. And the gun shop kept the gun from him for a very long period of time and didn't do anything to it other than clean it and charge him $50 to tell him that it was impossible to find a screw for a Smith & Wesson. Now, it's a standard, bog standard Smith & Wesson screw. I just didn't believe it. I googled it, found the part on Numrich, and had it with $7. I paid, I think, got 2 extra screws and paid more for shipping than the screws, or something like that. And found that with this most respected gun store in town, treated a lot of people that way, and people assumed that their word was law because they said so and because they had this reputation. Kind of was a formative experience of my expectation for gun stores and how much credit you should give them and how much deference. Anyway, and shortly thereafter the guy went out of business, and this friend had a rough time in his life, and I talked him through some rough times and some bad things happened. He just kind of wanted a reboot on his whole life and started getting rid of all of his possessions and things like that. And he said some things that meant a lot to me that I don't need to tell you, and gave me this pistol. And I was like, it was way too nice a gift. And I forget what he said, but it was something on the order of like, well, if you don't take it, I will give it away to somebody who wouldn't appreciate it as much. And so I took it, and at one point when I was really strapped for cash, I had to sell it, and I hated that. And that person, and then I started trying to buy it back from that person, and they gave me the last little bit of it back as a wedding gift. So in a sense, this gun is a gift to me twice. I never want to have to sell this again. And anyway, so those are stories and experiences. Then there are other aspects of what would make a good heirloom gun. I think a lot of it is in the way it's given, as I've kind of hinted there before, or who it's associated with, especially if you spent the time with them. Another aspect might be the intrinsic value of the gun. These both are metal frame guns, and I'm not in any way bashing on plastic frame guns, but they are very much more of a tool, and they're a tool that feels more dated. There's something classic about machine metal that just holds its value and its class longer than tactical Tupperware. Like this gun here, which is loaded, is an appliance. It does its job well. It is, I think, 6 or 7 years old in design, and it already looks dated to me. That doesn't look any more dated than it did in 1992 or whatever. It just has a classicness to it. And if we were to have a gun ban and go 3 generations down, there's more you can do to repair a metal gun than a plastic one. There's just some inherent advantages, particularly to a stainless or aluminum frame gun, for multi-generational longevity that lend themselves to being an excellent heirloom that is a used heirloom and not just a stored one. And for me, I guess that's one of my factors. I would want it to be something that each generation would enjoy using together, not merely have in a trunk in the attic to haul out for the equivalent of Antiques Roadshow. There's a gun that would be an heirloom gun to me if I had it. My grandpa's friend from World War II, who was sort of a spare grandpa for me, his name is Stanley P. Wincoat, had a little single shot, I believe it was a Winchester trainer rifle, that the cocking knob could be made independent or dependent on the bolt action, and I think it was made in something like 1916. There were a lot of little $3, $4, $5 Winchester rifles, 22, and this was one that he had lent my cousin and he taught me to shoot with, and if I could get my hands on that, that would be an heirloom rifle. And it might be a pistol. I could think maybe the first gun I used, but the first gun I used is special to me because of that, but would it be special to my kid because of that? I doubt it. Unless it was also the first gun they used. And anyway, I've probably said enough, and so I'll end with repeating the ask. I'd like to know in the comments below, or perhaps in your own Shooter's Coffee chat, which if you do one on this topic, go and paste it as a comment down below so I find it, because I miss a lot of the YouTube things. What would make an heirloom gun for you? And I'm guessing a lot of you already have them, and you maybe have a dozen heirloom guns, and so if that's the case, that's great. What makes one stand out above the others, or maybe two? Let me know. Thank you.